All right. Well, thank you again for coming. My name is Danny. For those that do not know me, I am a licensed esthetician, and one of my favorite things to do is to talk about skin, and that's what I'm going to do today. I was telling my dad on the way here that I was coming to give this talk, and he said, well, you better say something important, is what he told me. So I'm feeling like I do have something important to say. And some of you I know, and some of you I don't know, and so thanks for coming and just like on just a whim, you know, just showing up to hear about skin. So I have a business called Skin Harmonics. It's something that I started and got involved with as a skin person almost about, I would say almost 30 years ago, because I was so young. I made a few slides for you guys. The main thing that I want to say is that everything that we've been taught about skin is wrong. And it's sort of a wild thing to say. It's sort of a brazen thing to say that we've been taught wrong about skin, and that includes me and what I learned in aesthetics school years ago, and everything that I learned before I went to aesthetics school that I had learned when you pick up any magazine or you look through any herbal home remedy book or anything. And it really put me upside down for a long time with skin, because I felt like that. It's like, well, wait a minute. And I ended up being like this eventually, and then like that. But there was a lot that happened in between there. There was quite a bit that happened in between there. And just to give you a little bit about my background and just talk a little bit about me, like who am I? Okay, I was born there. And I did not spend my entire childhood there. There is a word that these people use, and it's called Hozo. And it's this word that is, you just can't translate it. And it's basically just like harmony of the totality of everything. It's this, I mean, it's the basic indigenous principle that everything has a place and that nature knows. She's eternally wise, and there's a place for everything, even if our minds can't understand it. And so I feel really impacted. There really is a health clinic tucked right up, that's kind of a famous photo of Monument Valley. But there is indeed a health clinic, not even a real hospital that's tucked back in those rock formations. And these are some family photos of me. Really quick, I promise this whole thing is not gonna be about me. My mother is pregnant with me there. And they're camped out on the reservation in Utah. So I think she told me she's about 4 months pregnant with me there. So, and that's my brother. This is my daughter. This is when things really got going for me after my son was born. This was when I really started getting serious about skincare and home crafting and just like the witch in the kitchen, just like growing everything and with the big books out on the counter and just like, you know, all of it. This was when it got really good for me. And my childhood and growing up, this is my brother, I was just completely outdoors. I didn't even know aesthetics was an industry. My parents were teachers until I was in my mid-20s. I had no idea. One of my best friends came to my house. We cleared off the dining room table, and she gave me a facial before I went to aesthetics school when I was like 28. So it was just, you know, all this home crafting and aromatherapy and everything. And anything, I was just devouring anything that I could get my hands on. And then, okay, we're gonna get really technical next. We're driving right on into skin, okay? I know there's not a lot of transition time there, but I want people to just really understand skin. So if you understand a few basic things about skin, everything will make so much more sense to you. And there'll be so much useless information that you won't need to even process, basically. This is our fat layer here, the hypodermal layer, no big deal. This dermal layer here is what makes this upper epidermal layer. So this is the manufacturing place for all of that. And I like this image. I actually had it made to my specifications because I wanted to show how as soon as the skin cells are made, they're round and fat, but they're dead as soon as they leave here, but they get flatter and flatter and flatter and flatter as they come to the surface. And this is the dead skin layer that we touch and feel and know. And yeah, I just think that that's important to understand. And this is not exactly to scale, but this layer, the dermal layer, is 25 times thicker than our epidermal layer. And that's where all the aging happens, collagen and elastin loss. That is what makes and creates the layer that we see and touch. Like that's the place of where skin is really happening. Oh yeah, this part here, the dermal layer, is 25 times thicker than the shorter epidermis. And it's not quite to scale, but this is where it's all happening, right here. That's what makes our skin. What I wanted to show next was all of skincare can be divided into two camps. Like it's a very polarized industry. It's either you're using the clinical strategy or you're using the natural strategy. And some companies use both. I know that I used to use both. And the clinical approach is all about, essentially when you break it down, the medical approach is all about inflicting trauma onto our skin in order to get it to make new skin cells. I mean, it's just fancier and fancier ways of doing that one thing. It could be a laser, it could be a microdermabrasion machine with lavender petals. It can be a glycolic acid made with natural sugar, but it's all versions of creating a microtrauma to our skin. And that's what defines a clinical, a medical approach to skin. And just a little bit of history, it was about in the 1900s, it was discovered somewhere in Germany in the late right before it turned to the 1900s, and then right around the 1900s in Germany, and then also, I think it was in Europe, somebody discovered that if you completely removed the epidermal layer with a phenol peel, that the dermal layer reproduces it. That big, thick layer that I was talking about, it has the capacity and the potential to just fully replace it. Like, wow, you took that top layer of skin that's dead, you expose that dermal layer, which is an organ, like it's gooey. There is, the dermal layer has no dead skin on top of it. It's like a ooey gooey layer, like it's a real organ. And it will very quickly remake the epidermal layer. So this was discovered. And then this laid the precedence for clinical skincare. Like that laid the template. And so just because we could, and the dermal layer could do that, knowing what we know now doesn't mean that we should do that. So yes, it's true that the epidermis can be replaced. However, what we know now is that there's a price for that. And I'll go into that a little bit later. But what defines clinical skincare is all these different ways that we're going to micro-traumatize the skin in order to get new skin cells. And then, of course, we have the natural camp. And it's leaning into natural ingredients and this encompassing of all these different things, nature processes, emotions, you know, our mind-body health, like everything that holistic health brings. It's this big umbrella term of functional medicine, holistic health, healing. And that is pretty much how the whole skin industry is divided. Either companies are doing one or the other, or they're doing both. And when I opened a spa years ago, and because my story is I did natural. I became an aromatherapist in my early 20s. I grew my own herbs. I made everything. So I was natural, and then I went to aesthetic school. And then I learned this other way of, I learned how to peel people and to scrape people and to laser people in aesthetic school, clinical medical school, me like being like, oh, I want, get into like, gonna be with the big grown-ups here and like do real skincare and spent many years in that phase learning that. And then when I opened my spa, what I realized is I call it the bipolar skin approach, because you'll be really mean to the skin with chemical peels and microdermabrasion and lasers, and then you're soothing it, and then you're nice, and then you go in and you hydrate and you do really soothing, nice things to the skin. And so much of what I did, because that was all I was learning and was being taught, was that you just kind of alternate. You loop, you're looping right in between those. You're gonna inflict some trauma, you're gonna make it really mad with inflammation, and then you're gonna back off, and then you're gonna be really nice and soothing and don't do anything. So that's basically what all the skincare companies are up to. I also want to talk about, if we're doing clinical skincare, there's two main strategies that they're employing. The first one is if you have acne, you're drying it out, you're astringing it. Like the whole thing is salicylic pills, it's clay masks, it's scrubs. Like the whole strategy is like, we just have to dry this acne out. It's too oily, we're gonna have to just dry it out. And then the other corrective practice is that if you're trying to correct aging, then you're doing these microviolences that I talked about, of lasering, chemical peels. It might not include salicylic because that's more for acne, but it'll be everything under the sun that's trauma-based to try to rejuvenate the skin. And what we have done is two things. We have, number one, with the dehydration of our skin, it suppresses the acne. It puts the skin in a state that's static, and it's pretty much frozen in a certain sense. Like it's so dehydrated that it can't behave as skin, and it's so dried out that it just is sort of concreted down, and any congestion doesn't really disappear, although it appears that way initially. It just kind of goes to sleep, if you will. It's just sort of sleeping under there, but it's not disappearing. And it might, at first, sometimes these practices, you think that they're working, as I know, because I spent years doing this, like, oh, it's working. But when you work with skin over a long period of time, you see that it's clearly not. But the other thing, the acne is just all about drying it out, pushing it down, and then with what's happening with the anti-aging techniques is that we've confused rejuvenation with a temporary trauma response that has everything to do with inflammating the skin. And the skin puffs up, and you're like, wow, these wrinkles look better because you have all this fluid in your skin. And the skin jumps up and makes all these new skin cells. Great. However, the price for that is that the dermal layer thins at a faster rate. Now, the first time I heard this, I didn't really believe it. I had to work with a lot of different skin types over a long period of time to actually believe this. But what happens is when our skin is just constantly, lasered, peeled, that dermal layer that I showed you earlier, it makes those repairs because that's its sole purpose. It's like, I call it the mother layer. Like, it'll do it. But it thins at a faster rate upon doing it. It's this layer that gets overworked, it has no sustenance, and it performs its job. However, we've just accelerated dermal thinning. And our dermal layer is thinning at 1% a year anyways, past age 25. Like, there's only so much thickness in there to begin with. So then, and some of this dermal thinning isn't apparent right away. It becomes more apparent in our late 30s, 40s, 50s, and of course, as with menopause, we go through even more dermal thinning. But I've watched this happen with enough people across many years to be like, wow. Some skin has a sturdier constitution, and it won't show these diminishing effects right away. But they do. If you stay in touch with these people and know them, like I've known people since I've been seeing people since my early 20s, so I've had the luxury and the privilege of being able to look at a lot of different skin and weigh in what these long-term effects are that are essentially, you know, really hard to quantify and track. So I just wanted to point out, and the other thing is that when we dehydrate our skin with astringing it with acne, is we actually tell our sebaceous glands to overproduce oil. So one of the main things that happens when our skin is dehydrated through chemical peels, scrubbing, or just from not using a lipid-rich moisturizer is that our sebaceous glands go into overdrive because the whole job of our sebaceous gland is to make oil. Why? So that it can come out through the top and trap water in our skin. And that trapping of the water is so important for everything. Like if our skin isn't hydrated, then it's sort of like a game over moment for skin. Skin that's functioning and trying to function in a chronically dehydrated state will sunburn more easily, much more likely to have an allergic reaction or be grumpy or sensitive to different things. And of course, fine wrinkles on dehydrated skin look worse. That's a big one. So I took a turn like this after I studied the natural skincare for so long. I went to aesthetic school. I learned the clinical way. I opened up a business called the Skin Sanctuary of Taos in New Mexico and had that place for several years. And after employing all of these strategies on everybody's skin, I was really upset because it just wasn't working. Like, I saw all the ads coming in for these skincare companies, and it's sort of like you get sort of hypnotized into like, okay, this is working and this should have fixed that problem. But when I was to be really honest with myself at home at night and really looking at my client's skin, like, it's not working. And in fact, I felt like I was making people's skin worse. And it was sort of this, like, a really low point in my career and in my life. And what happened was that Skin Harmonics just like went in this whole other direction. It looks very happy there, but it really wasn't. I felt like I was nowhere, but this is where it gets happy. So what I did was I combined both strategies. I started from nothing, and I literally rebuilt the skin wheel, like from nothing, based on what I could see and feel and know directly in my own experience with my skin, my children's skin, and my client's skin. And it was a really wild time of exploration and experimenting and trying all sorts of things. And basically what Medi-Holistic is, and I made that word up, is it's taking the best attributes from both camps and combining them in a way that makes us win. Like, it actually works. And so instead of penetrating trauma or chemicals or lasers or all of those things, we're penetrating dermal nutrients. And dermal nutrients is a thing that a medical doctor invented about, I think, 16, 17 years ago now. He lives in Denver, and it was really a huge game changer. I came across it in a magazine, you know, sort of just like in the moments of like flailing, of being really open to like anything. And what I discovered were, I can't even believe that this magazine published his article, because he was basically saying that anti-aging procedures will age you faster, and check out my dermal nutrients. And the whole magazine was funded by trauma-based procedures, by laser machines and microdermabrasions and retinols and all of that. So I can't even believe he was in there to begin with. He must have paid a lot to get his article in there. But what I discovered and started experimenting with these topical dermal nutrients is that they have the ability to make our skin make new skin cells, like in a real way, and not based from trauma, not because we're like beating our skin to death, you know, like come on, come on, come on, you know, beating at it and pounding at it. It's like, no, I'm gonna feed you. I'm gonna feed you something that is meaningful to you. So this doctor, what he did was he took the bioavailable form of vitamin A. It's called retinaldehyde. Very different, not your mama's retinol cream. It's a very specific type of vitamin A, and he encapsulated it with a liposome delivery system, a natural liposomal delivery system. And it's the same PC liposome that they use in a transdermal patch. And it's from lecithin granules. So it's not like it's some Agent Orange weird chemical thing. It's a natural lipid that's really good for brain function. And so he holistically engineered these topical dermal nutrients, and I started experimenting with them. And what I did was that I created a very simple system that makes this like user-friendly. Instead of combining 5 and 8 different serums and, you know, making it very difficult, which was how I think he did it, but he's a man and he has a different MO than me. I wanted to just talk about these 4 principles of what creates the Medi-Holistic skin resurfacing. And the first one I covered, it's all about dermal nourishment. There's 4 pillars of my system, and the first one is food. And then the second element is this element of protection. It's like we have to protect our skin, and that means using a sunscreen. It means using a moisturizer. So there's so much fear around clogging our pores that people are afraid to use cold-pressed oils on their skin. And in fact, we must have oils in order to trap the water in. I was just talking about that. And so this element of protection, this concept is that our skin needs protection in the form of sunscreen and in the form of using a moisturizer and protecting it from all of the things, basically, that I was just talking about. Part of what our skin needs is it's this ability to release. So I'm going to touch on the final one next in just a moment. It's water, but when our skin has the dermal nutrients, when it's properly protected, our skin actually goes through this really amazing phase where old congestion will shuffle up to the top and up through our skin and actually be released out the top of our skin. And it's a really amazing process to watch. And it was something that I had no idea existed. But our skin is a release organ, and it has to have its native ability to be skin. And that means it's dynamic, it's not static and pressed down, and it has the ability to move a whitehead through or move a breakout through. Because when that capacity is suppressed, I'll tell you what, it's not that it's not happening, it's just that it's happening underneath the surface. It's building up, and it's circling, and it's causing problems that maybe are easy to work with through your 20s and 30s, but at some point, and a lot of my clients are in their 40s and 50s and even 60s, of having skin out of balance their entire lives, thinking they never had breakouts, well, they're in there. And my light of truth sees it. And when the skin goes through this really profound healing, like, out it comes. And sometimes it can come out on their own, and that's all I do in my sessions is I give deep pore cleansing sessions to take this stuff out. And the final part was about water. Water is like so important. Okay, so jumping forward to my funny slide. This was gonna be my big joke. Not big joke, but. So when I lived in New Mexico, there was different types of chili, and now I'm in California, and there's all these different types of wine. And it is wild what is in people's skin. And I wished I'm gonna make a poster at some point about all the little things that are inside of people's skin. Because there's like compacted blackheads, there's milia that are just one little milia, but then there's milia clusters. And oftentimes when the skin has been holding on to this congestion for so long, is that it actually enmeshes in with the living skin tissue, because nobody dies from milia, nobody dies from blackhead. But when the skin can't clear it and is just holding it and holding it and holding it for years and years and years, I mean, I've taken things off of some clients' skin, we're like, wow, that's been there for 20 years. I thought it was a mole. You know, it's quite extraordinary how our skin has this amazing ability to just deal, and it'll store things. So it's really wild what is in people's skin and what comes out. And some people have very little, it's not any big deal, it's just a few little milia, a few blackheads, but then sometimes it can be like way more elaborate and, you know, a lot of stuff can come out. So along with this discovery of, in my book, there's a whole chapter about the detoxification process. Like, it's so wild, the phases that our skin goes through when it's clearing itself out. It's extraordinary. Because for me, it's like watching a sunset or like watching a land reclamation project. It's like you get to watch, you know, the texture completely shift. You watch like all this dynamic happenings on the skin, and then you watch it like arrive the way that, you know, the skin was years ago, texture-wise. So in me inventing my whole process, I don't do regular skin typing. So the old skin typing is all about like, do you have oily skin? Do you have dry skin? Do you have combination skin? Like, those are kind of the old-fashioned, I'm calling them old-fashioned ways of typing skin. And for me, all that matters is reactive skin, number one, is just skin that's born. It's just going to react. Like, it's not upset. It's just, you know, usually people with really fair skin tones, they blush easily. Their skin's responsive, and it's genetic, and their skin is absolutely fine. It just is always going to react. And so there's nothing wrong with reactive skin. It's just it's a beautiful thing. And then there's hypersensitive skin, where hypersensitivity usually comes from chronic dehydration, holding on to all of this congestion, the skin being so out of balance, skin that's over-procedured exhibits this hypersensitivity. And of course, there's median skin, which is skin that's like pretty stable. It doesn't get too irritated, even though it might have issues. You know, it's stable to a degree, because this will tell me how much nutrients somebody needs. It's all about, for me, calibrating dermal nutrients for different people's skin. Because if you give the skin the dermal nutrients, you give it water, you restore the barrier, then all of those other issues of being oily, of being combination, of being sensitive, like 90% of the time are just gone within a month easily. Like, all of those are just non-issues. Fun images for me. I was up late last night looking for images, and I was like, oh, I like her. Because I feel like healing has to do with, you know, a couple of different things. And on one end, it's just, we have to get really compassionate and soft with ourselves. And then on the other hand, it takes a little bit of like you know, like there's a little bit of like, hey, wait a minute, you know, no, when it comes to our own healing and changing the world for the better. So, and there was something really satisfying to me about putting these images side by side. And I think one of the main things that I want to say is that there's another way. Like, we've been so hypnotized into thinking that we have this, you can either go natural or you can go clinical, and you can even do both. But there really is another option now. There is this way of using natural ingredients and transforming your skin and not having to pay that price of accelerating your own aging in doing so. There's so many things in skincare products that are just like oh, you don't want to get me started. They're just, there's no meaning to them, and they're not even absorbable. Like, why would you put something on your skin that is basically a burden? So we need cleaner ingredients. You know, all of these containers that we're using in the beauty industry and all industry is just, it's awful. Like, all of these containers that we're buying, all this plastic. So my products come with bulk refills. It's all in glass. I feel really good about that. And then this last thing, extractions. Like, if you ever want to just kind of like mess with your dermatologist or your skin professional, like, ask them for extractions. Ask them for a way to get stuff out of your skin, because people don't even know to ask for that. And it's often like the thing that our skin needs the most, and it's just not being addressed. They're like, here's this cream, use this laser. But there's no help for the skin to actually get the relief it needs. Finally, just this idea of being with our skin in a way that is sane and healthy, because when we really think about what we're doing to our bodies in any realm, right? Like, we start to think about how we're actually treating our skin, and just how deep that philosophy goes and those behaviors go of when we're in that clinical conventional mindset of how we have to scrub away, scrub away, scrub away. And then we're always like, you know, micro self-harming ourselves with the peels and the microdermabrasion and all this scraping. And just this, if we stop to think of just the psychology of that, like, where is that going? And then having to ultimately understand that those practices are sabotaging our health, big picture, long term. Like, if they worked, I'm all about a little bit of pain, right? For the right payoff. Like, I get that. But it's when we're doing these things and there is no payoff. It's basically just trauma looping and feeding this old way of doing things that, to me, I'm blown away. I don't even know how it's existed for as long as it has, except for it's just had, you know, the miracle of how America monetizes things, I guess, and how we get into those grooves and industries start, and, you know, the momentum of that is just so large. So moving away from that and moving towards self-care practices in all ways, and especially with our skin, where we're really, really nourishing ourselves to heal. So instead of harming to heal, it's this nourish to heal concept, where we can give our bodies, our skin, you know, water, you know, true nurturing, protection, and this idea of barrier restoration, which of giving our skin an oil-rich moisturizer, something to actually trap the water in and restore the barrier of our skin, rather than always, you know, undoing it with astringents and all this over-cleansing. So there's a very different psychology that is just so wonderful when you've experienced one and then you move to the other, where it just brings so much equanimity. And what I can see with my client's skin is this, like, this confidence and this equanimity that starts to shine through. And the skin also, our skin, what I've also noticed is skin that's been over-procedured and, you know, scrubbed at and stringed at, it actually does something like armoring. Like, it actually will thicken up a little bit and get really mad anytime anything gets on it. And it should, because it's always sort of protecting itself from the next chemical peel, from the next onslaught, you know, of laser treatments. And so there's like an undoing of that, like an unwinding of that, and then our skin starts to really trust us, because we're only giving it these good and beautiful things, and it becomes dynamic, and it just starts, you know, resurfacing from the inside out, replacing itself, the epidermal layer, and of course purging itself in the process. It's really, really beautiful. I want to show you guys a really short little video as my final thing, and then anybody that wants to ask any questions. Okay, so this is a piece of cake, but it's skin. This layer is really dehydrated, and you can kind of see the cracks in it. The dermal layer is thinning, 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 thinning. This doesn't thin. Our epidermal layer never thins. It's the cake layer that thins. Now, this is the happy cake. So this is always being replaced. See the frosting moving. And check out, those are nuts, but they're really million blackheads. And see how they're like lifting up and out. This is my very technical, high reality graphic. Science-based. Very science-based. It is, yeah, this is, yeah. So, there's so much more that I am really working on in a real video, but here they are side by side. It just shows the dermal thinning, how just by plumping up by hydration, how the epidermal layer can just look so much better just by virtue of being hydrated, and of course how it has the capacity to release all the stuff that's in there that nobody ever really knew, and I didn't even know until I started going this deep into skin. Yeah, I think that's my rant. I think on any other day, there's like so much I want to talk about and share that this could have come out so many different ways. It's like, why did I say that? Why didn't I not say that? I don't know. But I would, if anybody has any questions about skin, about anything, I'd love to answer. Lisa. And you would have one at a time. Everybody's skin, there's so many different styles that people detox and heal in. Like, it's extraordinary. I'm always like so delighted and in awe because, like, Lisa, you had one or two,
Yeah.
you know?
But it really did start from here.
Yeah.
And move down, which you described.
Yeah.
And I remember as, working as a young person and being on the phone, and we used to call them like undergrounder. You'd have like a pimple that was, that's what I call them anyways, undergrounder. And I always had, because it was the phone, right? You had the phone right here. So I had this, and it actually came out during this process, and it was not pretty. I mean, poor Danny ended up in a stressful situation with me of when all these like cyst things under my skin were coming out. And she actually took me to a doctor one day because she was worried. I wasn't worried at all.
I just wanted to, do everything I could.
It really did purge, but that thing from, it had to have been 30 years or something. Oh my goodness. That actually purged.
Came up and out.
And now I don't see her at all. Sometimes if I want to indulge myself, every year and a half, oh, Danny, can I get a, extract? Because, you want to get rid of whatever's in there, but it's not like she wants you coming back for years and years and years.
No, I love to like detox skin and then
you just keep doing the products, and then you don't have the stuff. But I never had like terrible skin. But I did go through the whole purge thing, and as far as I'm concerned, I would never stop using these products. Absolutely never. It's with me for life.
I promise I did not plant her here.
No,
I promise.
Not even close. I was seeing a comment. It was because I'm from Santa Barbara, so
Well, it's an exciting time for holistic healing right now because there's so many people out there that are exploring and, renegading and, discovering new things because we know the detriments of what Western medicine can do. And beyond that is like, I'm just all about choice. It's like, we just need to make choices and, have an ability to know what we're doing. And
the thing
this is just another way to correct skin. There is a natural alternative.
It's really true what you say about the ingredients. One thing I've learned just from doing a little bit of looking into, products is that, number one, the FDA hasn't passed a major federal law since 1938 in this country. The beauty products industry, the FDA bans 30 toxic chemicals for everything we put on our skin. The EU bans 1,400. There's no regulation. We know that corporate whatever runs this country. And anyways, so there are companies that will by themselves ban a lot more than those 30, but all that stuff really is, we are learning it. We know it, that what we put on our skin goes into your bloodstream, and they're coming up with, there's so many cancers develop. Anyways, I don't want to go off but I love her stuff, and I wasn't planted here. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's wild because some people don't experience a lot of purging, and then some people do, and some people it's just, there's such a wide range of how skin heals that I can't always predict, what people are going to experience. I had one lady get on the products, nothing for a year, and after a year, her skin slowly started kicking up some stuff, but our skin is happier, I know that.
Well, I will say, Danny does know her stuff because just watching your Instagrams, I just used what I already had at home, but just started applying your techniques.
Based on what I had told
Yes,
you, yeah.
Yes, and just applying them in the different orders and applying them the way that and my skin changed.
Just by the
completely.
fundamentals that I
Just by
mentioned,
the
water,
fundamentals.
food protection,
Yes.
barrier restoration.
Yes.
Yeah, it's universal.
My skin made a turnaround, 180 turnaround. Yes, yes. And I haven't
Yeah.
even tried your products yet.
Oh, you just wait.
Yeah, so I'm excited.
Yeah, go ahead. I saw your hand.
My apologies, you may have addressed this in your presentation, but obviously everybody knows sugar is
Yeah.
tremendously detrimental to the skin. And over time, if you...
For our whole body.
For our whole body,
Yeah.
absolutely, and our skin shows it. For those who have been exposed to more sugar over time, does your process have an impact on reversing those?
Yeah, so what I've done is, because I work with those universals, the water, the barrier restoration, the dermal nutrients, and returning our skin's native ability to release, like those 4 things, like that's foundational. That's like...
Does it kind of reset you?
Yeah, it helps everybody's skin. And it's like sometimes people are using these really expensive serums or this one really expensive product just for spots or just for that. And it's like, cherries can be added later. But what I find over and over and over again is that baseline for people's skin health, even though they're spending tremendous amounts of money on their skin, isn't there. It's still chronically dehydrated. The barrier is not properly restored. The dermal layer is in malnourishment. Now we have this, we can really feed it for real. So now our dermal layer can get nourishment topically. And that helps everybody's skin. Like I've worked with diabetic skin. I've worked with all different types of skin. And no matter what's going on, it's all helped because we've addressed those fundamentals.
Sort of getting to the root.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how can we expect our skin to even do its basic pore function and all of it if we're not even giving it food, water, protection, and then allowing it to feel free enough? And, we have this expectation that our skin is like this cardboard and, object thing, and all of the pores are always photoshopped out. I mean, we've objectified everything, and including skin, and especially in the beauty industry, it's like this commodity and this thing, and so it has to be ironed, and it has to be Botox, and it has to be, derma filled, and it has to be this, we've done all of this to it that it's miserable. Like its skin is not happening, even though all of this money is being spent.
And not thinking of it as an organ, which it
Well,
is.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it may not be the most vital, but it's the largest organ.
It is, and it's so
If
important.
you mistreat it.
Yeah, I mean, with our immune systems, this is the thing that protects us, and proper barrier restoration, having our natural acid mantle intact, it's slightly acidic, is our first defense against, bacteria, viruses, all of that. Our skin plays a really important role. And yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because I've, had people in my chair where they've spent unrepeatable amounts on their skin, and their skin's a mess. And it might be Botox and it might be filled, but when you really look at it, it's not happy and it's not healthy. And it's evident. I mean, a little bit of makeup and a little bit of the right, what are all those filters that people are using with their phone? It's like there's all these cheat moves, but they don't matter if your skin isn't healthy, like for real. Like you know, we could spend all this money pretending to be healthy, like pretending to get our skin to look healthy, or we could just put some money in the right direction and actually make it healthy. Yeah, we often say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but I would like to say that our skin is the window to our soul.
How many people